Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Scrolling to Death. We have a very special guest today, Nicole Runyon. Hi, Nicole.
Hi.
She
Nicole.
comes to us from Michigan. So Nicole is a psychotherapist and a public speaker with over 20 years of experience specializing in child and adolescent mental health. So right in that audience that we speak to on our podcast, our goal at Scrolling to Death is to help parents better understand how screen time and social media can affect their families and provide parents with resources to help their family find an ideal balance between screen time and their in-person connections. Mm-hmm. So we're really excited to be able to share Nicole's insight with you guys today. So I connected with Nicole on LinkedIn through an amazing woman named Leslie. And Leslie is a successful keynote speaker like you, Nicole, and also a social media reform advocate. Leslie lost her 20-year-old son, Austin, in 2016 and has since dedicated her time to promote suicide prevention. And her posts are so inspiring. I've been following along with them. And she talks a lot about the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is tasked with higher level reasoning and decision making. And I was sort of following along and learning from Leslie. And I asked if she would want to speak on our podcast. And she was like, you don't want to speak. I mean, I'll speak to you. But she was like, you need to talk to Nicole Runyon. And so we were so excited that you responded right away. Nicole, do you want to share with us like what got you into this line of work and supporting families?
Sure. So that goes way back to when I was 10 years old and I decided I was going to be a child psychotherapist.
Oh, wow.
Which is very unique, right?
Yeah.
Most 10-year-olds want to be what, like astronauts or
veterinarian.
Yeah,
Princesses.
Exactly. Princesses.
Or princesses.
Yeah.
So I always just sort of knew I wanted to do this work and I knew I wanted to work with kids. And so I went into private practice right around 2010-ish. Actually, it was probably more 2008, 2009. And a couple of years in, I started noticing this very interesting trend with the kids I was seeing. And what I was noticing is they were coming in with these mental health issues, pretty severe mental health issues. And I would do the psychosocial histories. I would ask the parents, what's going on? Was there trauma? Was there something? Was there a precipitating event to this anxiety? And I couldn't really. There was nothing rooted in anything traumatic or any psychosocial issue, and it was kind of baffling because in my training, I was taught that a child is going to respond to their environment, and the things you're seeing from a psychological standpoint are mostly going to come from the family, maybe the school. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of asked myself, what's going on with these kids? And at the time, people weren't really talking about what technology and smart devices and all of this stuff was doing to kids. But I certainly, kind of pinpointed that because it was the only change that I could think of as to what happened with the kids that I started seeing in the earlier part of my career and the kids I was seeing at this point in the game.
Wow, that's very early to be pinpointing that.
Yeah, well, it was kind of obvious, like, and I was getting reports from the kids, like they were allowed to then bring their phones to school. There was like a year there where the schools were resisting it and they were saying no phones. And then it was like Pandora's box had opened up. Yeah. And that year is when I started seeing a lot more just psychopathology. And when I first started talking about it, people thought, no, that's not it. This is the way of the future. We have to teach kids how to use this stuff. I'm sure you've heard all of that.
Yeah.
And I think, the lockdowns and COVID really tipped the scales for people being in so much pain around isolation and not being just, that one-on-one socializing. And now everybody wants to talk about this subject.
Yeah. But still 15 years later, they're giving the kids iPads in kindergarten in class. Mm-hmm. And the iPad time or the amount of screen time is just up to each teacher. And in my experience, the teachers don't even really know what's on there. So it's still like we're playing catch up a little bit with schools, at least from what I'm seeing.
Well, yeah. And I think parents too. I think it's one of those things. It's like junk food. Everyone knows it's bad for you,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not going to stop doing it.
Right.
Especially when everyone else is doing it too. So then it just makes it feel like, oh, this must be okay. This is okay, right? Everyone else is doing it.
Yeah, I like what you said, like that group think, where you think it's okay because everybody else is, even if they're talking about how it's not good. They're just going by what their peers are doing. So they think, okay, they're good, we're good. Nobody has to really make a change because making a change is painful.
Mhm.
Yeah. And one thing I talk about is being like an independent thinker as a parent. Like you don't have to do things just because everyone else is doing them. You're not a bad mom if you don't post your kids all the time. Like you're not a bad partner if you don't post your partner all like just it's okay to do things a little bit differently and have some conviction in that. Um, but I wonder, so you were seeing a direct connection between the heavier technology use, even back then, and the child's mental health state.
Yes, particularly at that time with teen girls.
Mm.
Their psychopathology just started to deteriorate. Lots of anxiety, self-harm. The girl groups were getting really toxic. I mean, girl groups have always had some drama. There's mean
Mm-hmm.
girls, but it was magnified. So that's really what kind of made me start thinking about what's going on.
And how has it changed to today? Is it worse? Is it better?
I think it's worse,
Yeah.
sadly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because in 2008, 9, like you said, did we have Instagram yet? I don't think so.
No, there was definitely Facebook. And at the time, I
Mm-hmm.
think the kids were on Facebook because the
Yeah.
parents hadn't gotten on there yet.
Oh, yeah.
um, so there was that, but I also think those kids started out with really just messaging and texting, and I think they have some messaging apps, and that was causing problems because, as you know, I'm sure the tone of voice is missing. Things just don't get communicated the way that they do in person. So I was noticing a lot of issues around just that at the time.
Wow. And then exponentially, there's so many opportunities now to be messaging on all these different platforms. Um, Go Ash.
And I think too, Nicole, you touch on such a great point on the social skills and the communication skills that are getting lost, and especially then we add in COVID, right, where we were almost kind of forced with this dependence on technology, um, and how the communication and the social skills that are getting missed of just the facial cues and being talking to someone in person about something that might be uncomfortable, instead that we're texting or we're messaging or we're DMing on social media on some sort of conflict, or we're just blocking. We're
Yeah.
teen girls and boys are just like blocking. They have an issue with something and then they just end up blocking that person on social media. And the social skills, communication, and conflict resolution skills are really getting lost.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. I think, to your point, Nikki, about what Leslie talks about with the prefrontal lobe,
Mm-hmm.
there's so much learning that needs to be done all the way through childhood, in so much brain development that's not happening. And that is absolutely a part of it. Like, not just tone of voice, but body language and somebody's, yeah, to your point, facial expressions. It's so important for brain development.
And that you talk about generational differences, and that's something you focus on. And I feel like there's no bigger generational difference than when we grew up and when these teens are growing up. And Ashley and I started using Facebook right when it started when we were 18. And so we literally had that like private childhood, private teen years where we could mess up and it wasn't online. And then, now everything's online. And so, you know, how can parents help their kids through this when we didn't even grow up with it, so we fully don't understand? So a lot of parents are looking to us for like, what do I do in my home? What specific, like how much screen time should these kids have? Like really like tangible tips. So but let's talk actually a little bit more about the brain. I think parents have a hard time, like I've learned about the prefrontal cortex processes information, right? And we're in higher amounts of screen time is actually thinning out that prefrontal cortex and making it more difficult to process information. Am I right? And when I say that, I'm not an expert in that, but
Yeah,
how
no,
can you help us understand that a little bit better in other parents?
yeah. So my understanding is the gray matter is not developing the way it needs to. So the screen is, you can think of it like it's a guard to natural childhood developmental processes. And child development works like the rungs of a ladder. So every stage builds on the one before it. And it's not to say that you can't move forward if you haven't really completed a stage or the stage didn't go well, but the next stage is going to just be that much harder. And so there's different components of development. There's the social emotional, there's the brain development, and there's physical development. And when I talk about it, I talk about how it's like a wheel, because one leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's happening, because they're not getting the social emotional development they need, then that's affecting their cognition and their brain development. And that's where that science comes in with the gray matter, and how, like, just physically, not just in their brains, but their bodies aren't developing the way they need to. I've been hearing from speech therapists and occupational therapists, and I don't want to get myself in trouble here because there isn't any experimental research yet. This is all anecdotal, but these are professionals who have been doing their work for decades, and they're reporting similarly to me, where they're seeing a lack of physical development with no root in any medical issue. And their training tells them, well, if I'm seeing this, then it should be because of this.
Right.
And many of them are attributing it to the screens. And it makes sense, right? I mean, we're giving kindergarten, we're giving 2-year-olds iPads. 2-year-olds should be running and jumping and climbing trees and, playing in nature. And instead they're on a device.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We did an episode on iPads and tablets that we released last week. And then we recorded an episode on YouTube Kids specifically, which was really interesting to dig into. And there is a study about low quality media. So only 4% of the videos on YouTube Kids are educational, and the rest are considered low quality media. And there is studies on the more the kids watch low quality media, the poorer their language development is. So that's like, the research has been really interesting to find. And I think there's more and more coming through. And it all makes sense, right? It all seems obvious, but for some reason, I think we need that research to like really hit, to push it through and help people understand and make real changes. So for your clients that you work with, like, what are the main suggestions that you make for their family to help, especially parents, help their teens through this time? I mean, really, I'm assuming limiting screen time is one of them, but so if you could talk us through a couple of those.
Sure. What I tend to work on with parents in particular is not so much like an ABC 1, 2, 3 thing, because obviously every family is different. Every kid is different. They're going to respond to technology differently. So what I try and do is help parents really dig into their instincts and their connection with their kids. Because I think so much of our culture right now is causing disconnect with everybody, including parents and children. And so my thing is if you're connected and you're attuned with your child, you're going to know, right? Like, you're going to know if you gave them the iPad or the TV or whatever for 30 minutes and they're starting to look glazed over and they're starting to, kind of melt down a little. Okay, it's time to take it away.
Yeah.
So I tend to not I'll give ages, like rough ages, but I tend to not give specific instructions or tips, because I think parents are just going to know. They know better than anyone what's good for their kids.
I love that, where you're empowering the parent to be, hey, you're the expert of your child, and to be in tune with their needs, their feelings, but also like observe them. Like, if you're going to allow the screen, the TV, the iPad, the phone, just be in tune with them. Know when they're done.
That's right.
Know when they're done with it.
That's
Yeah,
super
it's so
interesting because it's, people use the iPad as the babysitter when they
yeah.
need to go take a shower or cook dinner. That's when the screens happen. So the parents are not observing. And that's something we talk about on the podcast is you have to be involved with these screens. Like you have to be watching things with them, communicating with them about it, seeing how it makes them feel, like a daily conversation about how they're feeling, especially when they're getting a little older and getting active on social media.
Yeah. And if parents are using it to go take a shower or get a break,
Mhm.
then that begs the question, depending on the child's age, why isn't the child able to entertain themselves, right?
Yep.
And like, why
Yes.
isn't the child able to be a little bit bored or, try to figure something out in that moment when parent is busy doing
Mhm.
something?
Right.
That's really important.
I love what you said there, Nicole, and I think that even gets to the root of it. And even just asking yourself, why are we giving our kids the iPad? Like, what do parents need? And also, too, let me ask you this question is, what do you, when you are talking with parents about social media, about tech, about iPads, what resistance are you getting from some of the parents? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. The first thing that parents say is, but they're going to have a meltdown, or they're going to be really angry, or they're going to be depressed because they can't keep in touch with their kids. So that is the biggest issue. And, I'm a little bit unpopular because my answer to that is, yeah,
Mhm.
Right?
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
okay. And they're going to be upset, and it's okay for them to be upset.
Absolutely. You I love following you on Instagram. You have some really great content on there, which I highly recommend um any parent that's listening to us right now to follow Nicole on at iGeneration Mental Health on Instagram. You wrote a post that I really loved, and it was talking about like students and kids struggling with discomfort, and how like you were encouraging parents and kids to confront the discomfort right head on, instead of relying on social media to bypass the need to use and engage in critical thinking skills like problem solving skills, social media. And this, I think, is really tough for parents. This is really tough to see their kids in discomfort, to face challenges head on. And I was wondering, like, why do you think that is? Why do you think this is so tough for parents to see them struggle, feeling their feelings, initiating conversation, making friends, actually resolving conflict in person? um, what do you see? What do you see is the reason why parents, this is so tough for parents?
It's because parents haven't resolved the discomfort in themselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Whoa. Mhm.
And
absolutely.
yeah. And this is the generational differences that I talk about. I call it the pendulum swing. You've
Mhm.
got one generation being raised a certain way, and then they don't like that. There's wounding around that. And so they swing so far in the other direction. And I think that's what's happened with Gen Z is we've swung so far into we didn't resolve our discomfort in previous generations. We didn't get that, right? I mean, one of the good things that's happening for Gen Z is that they're being asked what their feelings are. They're being encouraged to talk to
Yeah.
therapists or have dialogue around getting their needs met. We didn't have that in previous generations. So parents are unable to give their kids that hard knocks thing because they had too extreme of a hard knocks life.
Absolutely. And, even I work with parents, and it's hard for them to understand like the difference between connecting with your kid and allowing them to struggle, and allowing them to be uncomfortable and to like build their tolerance with it.
Yes, 100%. It's a hard thing for parents to figure out. What I notice is that most parents will just give their kids whatever they want, or, you know, make them happy, make them comfortable. And that's how they think they're connecting. And what's happening to parents is we're burning out because, you know, what, we're in our cars, like, you know, for hours a day, driving them everywhere, and we're, you know, bending over backwards for them. And then we're too burnt out to really actually connect. So then everybody's on technology because everyone's stressed out and burnt out. So peeling that back and kind of simplifying things, and just being with your kid, even if it's a bad moment, that's where it's at.
Yeah. And I think it even comes to the point of where your kid even might say, like, but mom or dad, like, all my friends are on social media. Like, why can't I be on there? Or I get this too, is I'm going to be left out. And I'm always left out because I'm not on social media and I'm not seeing what my friends are doing. And, you know, they're not hyper connected 24/7, and they feel, and, you know, the parents then feel for them, and they allow it to then happen. That's usually one of the main reasons that I hear is, well, I just don't want my teenager to feel sad and to feel so left out because they don't have a lot of friends. And I might be the reason they don't have friends because I said no to social media.
100%. That is the most common reason why parents give in, even if they don't agree with it or don't want it. Yeah. And I think that those are some opportunities to teach your kid how to socialize and how to be, you know, uncomfortable, right? How to like reach out to a friend and say, hey, I'm not on Instagram, but do you want to like hang out this weekend? You know, and I know that's unconventional these days, but it's really important we don't lose that. We cannot lose that. Otherwise, we're in big trouble.
And it can feel like, for me, you know, not posting on social media, or not being on social media personally for years, and not posting my kids, like I feel like I'm the only one. I've kind of recruited Ashley over, but like there's no, you know, so many parents are. So I think finding commonality in other parents, that I bet if you just bring up this topic with other parents that are in your community, they probably don't want their kid on social media either. So maybe if you can join together and all have a shared goal with your kids to encourage them to socialize face to face, and maybe, you know, if you need someone to lament with, like, you know, speak with the other parents about it. It's not something that doesn't get talked enough about within at least my parent groups that I'm around.
That's a really good point. I think just like the kids are using technology to connect and they're actually disconnected, that's happening to us as well. I
Right.
had never felt more isolated and alone than when I had my first child, and that was almost 15 years ago. So, you know, we're not, as like a culture, as a society, we are just not connected overall. So yes, I think that's a great idea, Nikki, is just to talk to other moms, because 9 times out of 10, everyone's on the same page about this.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everyone's affected by it negatively, and everyone is eager to talk about it. So it's, you know, I encourage parents that are listening to bring it up with, you know, another mom or dad when you're at pickup. Like, just start these conversations and see what comes up. I bet, you know, you'll all be able to relate on it, and then maybe find similar approaches that are safer for your kids.
Yes.
Totally, because they're not alone.
Right.
There's so many parents. We just need to bring up the topic. We need to bring up the conversation. I think, you know, as a parent, even if I was in their shoes, I would just be thinking, like, am I the only one thinking like this? Am I the only one feeling like this? And I don't think so. If we were to bring it up, I think there's a lot of parents out there that have these feelings. But again, society and culture and everything around you is saying that it's okay, or this is the way of life. Hey, embrace the digital life. Like, it's here to stay. And so it almost feel like, am I going crazy? Like, should I not be feeling like this? Right.
Yeah, I had an experience actually last spring where a mom from my daughter's school found out that, you know, I have this philosophy, and she actually wanted her daughter to play with my daughter. And I thought, well, how opposite of what the kids will tell you. The
Yeah.
kids will tell you, oh, I'm never going to get any friends if I'm not online. So yeah, the more you find out who is on this page, the more you're going to want to connect with them.
Yeah,
Totally.
absolutely. Um, so today we released an episode about sharenting and a lot about online safety, digital kidnapping, the scary things that are happening when it comes to sharing your kids online. Are you seeing any of that in your practice? Are you researching any of that when it comes to sharenting? Kind of where are you at with that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things going on for the kids when parents are sharing about them. One is obviously it's a consent issue, right? If they don't even know what's being shared about them, they're going to grow up and potentially have some like feelings of betrayal about that.
Right.
The other thing is I think it's the modeling. I think we really have to pay attention to what that's teaching them because most parents, as we were talking about, aren't okay with their kids being online all the time. Even if they are, I know there's a lot of parents that will kind of nag their kids, oh, you've been on your phone too long, get off your phone.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that modeling for them, that since they were babies we've been putting their lives out there? Do we
Mm-hmm.
expect them to be private with their own lives, or are we showing them it's okay to put yourself out there? And yes, it can be dangerous. If you're free with sharing yourself, then it's going to be easier to send that boy who asked you for a nude photo, or
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be easier to say something inappropriate on a text chain and have that go viral and have your life ruined. So there are just a lot of ramifications that I think when parents are sharing at those young ages, they don't realize what it could turn into when they're older.
Yeah.
I love what you said there. And especially like modeling and being consistent that if you're sharing a lot of photos of your kids and then they get to become 13, 14, 15, 16, and whenever you guys the family decides that they could have social media, right? Or even they did, sorry, you're sharing a lot of pictures of your kids on social media and then you tell your kid no. Oh, that's
Doesn't make any
confusing, and
sense.
it
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. And then let's be real, like teenagers are very keen on that. Like they will hone in and go, wait a second, you've been sharing years and all of my childhood, and now I'm not allowed to have social media?
Yeah,
That doesn't make any sense here.
0 cents. Yeah, and you're right. They will get you on that. They'll figure that one out quickly.
Yeah.
So quick, so quick.
Yeah.
And what about between like the couple? So between the parents, do you find some conflict sometimes in how it's being approached per parent? I'll notice some, one parent doesn't let any screen time, another parent, the second the other parent's out of the room, they're getting their iPad. So is that a conflict that you're seeing within your practice?
Yeah, I see that a lot actually in divorced families.
Mm-hmm.
And it's to a point where one parent will say, well, no, they need to have a phone to keep in touch, and the other parent disagrees.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge issue, right? Because what they do on their own parenting time is up to them. So that's a huge conflict I see. But mainly, if I'm seeing families who are still together, the parents seem to be on the same page. But I'm sure it happens where,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they're not. And that's
Yeah.
that's tough. Yeah.
And I want to follow back up on too. I had a mom friend. We were talking about YouTube Kids. I was sharing some of the inappropriate content that can be available on there, and a few other things. And she the next day said, "I didn't let my son watch YouTube Kids, and he actually didn't care. He just went and did something else." So I think sometimes we underestimate our kids. Like maybe they're not going to blow up. Maybe they're just going to get creative and find something else to do.
Yeah, I always say they want you to take it away from them
Mm,
because they're they need you to save them from themselves. Just like any danger, you're gonna chase after them if they're running in the street, and they might be upset with you because you stop them from running, but they need you to do that to save their life.
right.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
a lot of times they respond pretty well. Or I hear people say, "Oh, there was some mumbling and grumbling, but after a day, they were fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think parents are afraid of that big reaction and they might not get that.
I am also hearing some struggling around, they've given their kid a phone at 9, 8, 9, 10 years old, and they regret it. And how do we go back? How do we take it away without causing a big problems? Do you have any suggestions there?
How do we take away the social media without
Yeah.
causing any problems?
Yeah.
How do we do that?
Yeah, well, that's impossible. You're going to cause ruffles.
Mhm.
And that's again like that conversation had about parents not letting their kids be uncomfortable or being afraid of their reaction. This is where parents really need to stand strong in their convictions that this isn't good for you and you're going to struggle with not having it. And I'm here for you, but I'm not going to give in.
Absolutely. And it hones in on that. Sorry, Nick. Absolutely. And it hones in on that connection with your kid is, your kid has to trust your judgment, and your kid has to respect your limits as well. They're probably gonna absolutely grumble and ask. Most teenagers do, like, well, why? Well, why? Well, why? And it's so important to sit down and explain it to them, and to, instead of just like, because I said so, right? That most teenagers, because I work with teens, most teenagers aren't gonna deal with that explanation very well. But I think you bring up a really great piece on parents being okay. You have to be okay with the discomfort of it, and then rely on the connection with your kid. And know that, I think too, is if they take it away and they get this big reaction, that the relationship is just like fallen apart, and it's just completely shattered, and oh my gosh, and I have all this work to build it up, instead of having faith and have some trust on the connection and the relationship you have with your child, and continue to build that.
Yeah, that's right, because that is the connection. Like you're not your child's friend. You're not your child's friend until they're adult children. And only when they're adult children will they be your friend if you had good boundaries earlier.
Yes.
So that is exactly what they need from you at that point in their life. And you're right, that's the connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it can be interesting to find the balance between, like, they're eager for some control in their decisions and, looking for that, but also keeping your control of them and not letting them have, like, even with my 2-year-old, like, if she's really stern about something she wants and she's not supposed to have it, I'll ask her, like, who's in charge? And she'll say, mommy. And then she stops, and it's like, sometimes I'm like, is that okay to say? But I think yes, right? Is that okay, guys?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm in charge, right? It's like they're not in charge of you. So another couple I know, like they let the kids watch YouTube all the time, and it seems impossible to them to take it away. And I'm like, did we forget that we're in charge? Like, did we forget that they need to do what we say? Like, yeah, so it comes with a discomfort thing and the, creating conflict. It's a very interesting topic. And I want to say Ashley shared a stat with me months ago, but that 80% of parents have not talked to their teenagers. So 80% of parents of teens have not talked to their teens about social media, like, at all, which just makes us feel so far away from where we need to be.
Yes, that
Like,
is staggering. I did not know that.
yeah, and I think I fact checked it, Ash, and found it too. Like, we need to be talking about it if your teenager's on social media, you need to be talking about it every single day.
Yes.
So,
So that's either like the parents don't know how to discuss it. They're avoiding the uncomfortableness of the topic, or they don't know how, like, they just don't know where to start. Or they have just not a lot of education around the dangers and the side effects of social media.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the hard part. People ask me that all the time. Like, is it that parents don't know or they're apathetic? I tend to think it's that they don't know. When I get parents in my practice coming in, they're baffled with some of the things I talk about and some of the education. Parents aren't talking to their kids about sex. They're not talking, they're not talking about drugs. It's like those difficult conversations are just not being had. And it's baffling to us, right? Because we're in the space and we're really on it. But I think the majority of parents are just trusting that it's all okay because, as we talked about earlier, everybody's doing it.
Yeah. And our parents didn't talk to us about those things either,
No.
So it's like, I feel grateful to be in the first generation where we're going to teach our kids about sex. We're going to talk to our kids about drugs and alcohol and all these things that could be tricky, and instead of learning it from their friends. Or now they are learning it from the internet, which is so crazy to think about.
Social media influencers, that's what they're learning.
That's who they're going to learn
some of it
from.
too.
Those experts.
Very thought.
So I want to switch gears a little bit. So we, Ashley and I, are not personally on social media really, and we both have businesses, and so we have to promote ourselves on social media, right? And this can be uncomfortable. And I hear it from the guy that owns the gym that I go to, my other friend who owns a fitness business. Everyone's talking, all these business owners talking about how they have to be active on social media, but they hate doing it. And so I wonder, I think you did a post recently similar to this, and I wonder how you feel about it.
Oh, 100%. It's, I resisted it for years. I mean, I've been talking about this for 10 years in my community. But I've been wanting to talk about it on a broader scale for a long time. And that's actually the reason why I resisted it. I just didn't want to be on social media. And I'm, really pushing myself out of that comfort zone because I feel like this is so important. And I feel like it's a calling. I couldn't let it go. And my husband actually pushed me into it. And because he saw that it was tormenting me, I just couldn't let it go. And I kept telling myself, it's okay. I'll just talk in my community. It's all good. And he really pushed me. And I had a moment of stress a few months ago about it. And I kind of, yelled at him and I said, why did you do this? Why did you push me? And ultimately I chose, right? I said, yes, it's not his fault.
Yeah.
But I was, in an irrational moment.
Totally.
And he said, I'm not sorry.
I love it. I love it.
So there it is. I feel like, unfortunately, it is the only way for us to get our messages out there.
Especially to people who are still super active on social media and need to start thinking more critically, like they're on Instagram all the time, and this is who we need to get in front of. And then on places like LinkedIn, I think it's very interesting. I've recently been connecting and engaging with tons of people who are in this space. The Center for Humane Technology posted an insane video this morning. You'll have to go look at it, about the growth of social media and the dangers. And so I wouldn't be seeing any of that and absorbing any of that and able to kind of bring it to our audience if I wasn't active on there. But it can be difficult with Instagram, especially not to be checking who's looked at every, Instagram story and comment and all these crazy things. So
I find boundaries. I prefer LinkedIn over Instagram. It's just more professional. It's more, I'm meeting people like you guys. I feel like Instagram is, a very kind of, it's all about images and pictures and they want the videos, and I'm really struggling with the videos.
I know.
I hear you.
It's my least favorite thing. The video editing.
Nicole, I saw a post on your Instagram about, you did a presentation at a school, which is awesome. I've done some presentations too. So I just think that's so helpful in meeting the parents where they're at, if it's at PTA meetings or even meeting or doing presentations at the school with the students and the teachers. So I think that's so awesome. You did a presentation with social media, how it affects teenagers. And one of the pieces I saw was addicted to validation, how teen girls are addicted to the validation. And the thought that I had for you and the question I have for you, and even just even for Nicki too, is how can teens get the validation they're looking for without social media? And like, what's missing? So if they're on social media addicted to the validation, what what are they really needing, and how can we help teens, especially teen girls, get the validation they're looking for without social media?
Yeah. So, um, outside or external validation is never going to be enough.
Yeah.
And I like to call it like it's a bonus, but it can't be the only thing you're looking for. So there has to be some internal, like I set a goal, I did something hard, and I accomplished that goal. And that's how you validate yourself and you feel self worth and you feel self trust. And 9 times out of 10, because you did that, you're going to get some external validation. You know,
Sure.
you might get an award or a trophy or an A, you know, in school. And again, that's a bonus. That's great. Like we all kind of need those motivators, but it can't be the only thing.
Yes.
So if girls are on social media, then they need to be able to, in real life, fill themselves up with good stuff
Mhm.
so that any likes or comments or anything they get on social media are just a bonus and not the only thing.
Yes. Just secondary. That it's just I like what you said. They're just little bonuses. How can
Mm-hmm.
parents help with this? Like, how can parents help with teen girls that are addicted to that validation on social media and look towards social media to feel good about themselves, and or maybe, gosh, look to social media to kind of punish themselves, or um, keep them in this self kind of punishing cycle. If that means, I know you kind of touched on eating disorders a little bit too.
So I've noticed that what parents need to do nowadays, you know, talk about generational differences,
Hmm.
is they have to help their kids find something, like find goals and find motivators and push them to do those things outside of anything online. So that can come in the form of whatever, like you start your semester and you want to set out getting a certain grade point average, and you know set a goal for that and you work really hard to get that, or you join a sport or you have an activity or something. And I noticed that I've been sort of talking to parents about, well, they're not going to volunteer to do it, they're not going to do it because
Mm-hmm.
they have this medium, this modality in front of them that doesn't make them have to do it like previous generations. So you kind of have to make them. You know, I recommend that parents say, "Hey, you got to do something. You can choose, but you
Mm-hmm.
have to do something." You know, and for older teenagers, that can be a job. You know, that's a really good way to feel good about yourself. You know, if they're not into a sport or an activity or something, but they have to do something in the real world.
I struggle with that even with my 7, almost 8 year old. She'll get very excited about soccer, then theater, then jujitsu, and now she wants to quit. You know, it's always a few months, and then she doesn't want to do something else. She wants to stop doing that thing, and
Yeah.
and because it's hard, and I tell, I'm trying to work with her on things that are hard are good and will make you stronger, but also like making it difficult for her to quit. Like you can't just quit because you decide to switch to something else, but also the talk about you have to do something. Even as a 7, 8 year old, like I'm not trying to fill up their schedules every night of the week, but one thing, two things I think is important from younger ages. I think we can start to work with them on that from 5, 6, 7 years old.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree, because to your point, it's the hard stuff that they want to quit. And
Yeah.
we have to be able to
Right.
push them past that. Yeah.
Yeah. And you feel the best after you do something hard and you do it well,
Totally.
or even if you don't do it well and you don't win, but you did something really hard.
Yeah.
But on Ashley's question about, or conversation about getting validation, I think it's interesting the way we approach videotaping, constant videotaping and photos of our kids, because we're telling our little babies like constantly have an audience. So
Mhm.
they say their first word or whatever, we're like, do that again. And we get it on video and we share it with maybe just our family, but it's like they act constantly like they have an audience, which I think is an interesting thing. And now with a lot of the kids watching YouTube, or YouTube, I'll see like 4 and 5 year olds being like, hey guys, so today we're going to, do this and follow and subscribe, just for their mom's video camera, and they think it's cute.
Wow.
But it's like, maybe we shouldn't be encouraging kids to do everything, to make them think everything they do is for an audience of people.
I love how you put that. I never thought of it that way. But yeah, it's an audience.
Yeah.
And then they're having to perform.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
They know people are going to see, more people than just their mom and dad
Right.
are going to see this, even if it's just the family, but a lot of times it's who knows how many people online, and they're aware of it.
That's
Well,
right.
and then too, what I even think is like, then they're shifting their thoughts of like, if they have to perform, like, who am I impressing?
Mhm.
Am I making my parents happy with this? Am I making myself happy? Because this is a 7, 8-year-old, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Am I making other people happy? Like, who are they performing for?
Instead
It's
of
an
just doing
interesting,
it
yeah.
for themselves, like maybe they're even censoring themselves a little bit because they don't want to look silly or be
Yeah.
embarrassed, rather than
Yeah. Kind
just
of.
being like what we used to do on video cameras, in our rooms with our friends, like when we were teenagers, that like no one's ever going to see that, but we were like, whatever we were doing.
That is a really good point. Wow, I never thought of that. And I'm even
Let's,
thinking of my own parenting because I have almost 15-year-old and a
Mhm.
9-year-old. So they're like 5 years apart.
Mhm.
And with my 15-year-old, I didn't have an iPhone.
Mhm.
So there are pictures and videos of him, but his sister has way more pictures and videos of her
Mhm.
because it was so much more convenient for me
Yeah.
and my husband to take those of her.
Mhm.
And so just the difference in their personalities because of that. How
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and we talk about a little bit on a recent episode about not everything being a picture moment, and that like we need to just take a step back and realize like it's okay to just have that experience between you and your kid and not have to capture it.
Yes, that's huge.
Yeah. But yeah, let's keep thinking about that. I think that is an interesting thing to address.
Yeah, that is. Wow. Thanks for that
Sure.
insight.
Sure.
Wow. Well, one thing that people are often confused by is like, what are the different technologies and how do they affect kids? In other
Mhm.
words, like, is gaming okay?
Mm.
Is are tablets okay for educational games? And I really, when I talk about it, I package it into everything.
Yeah.
I think it's all related. I think even educational games, those games are very like overly stimulating with the music and
Mhm.
I think it trains the brain, to like press a button and get instant gratification. So it becomes addictive.
Mhm.
And, you might think, oh, this is great. My 2-year-old's learning how to read. But at the end of the day, that doesn't make the 2-year-old a genius because everyone's going to catch up to that kid.
Right.
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 Like
Totally.
we're not creating geniuses here by giving them, a learning tablet.
Yeah.
So I like to distinguish that for parents because I think some people justify, oh, well, it's okay because this or it's okay because that. And I
Mhm.
think it's all the same.
Yeah.
We need to do an episode on gaming soon because that keeps coming up. And I know a lot of
Yeah.
the gaming platforms have social media elements, involved in them.
Mhm.
They're chatting and they can connect with, they add friends and things like that. So there's that social aspect within the games. And
I
a
have a
lot of,
question.
yeah,
Oh,
gosh,
sorry.
I have something else
Uh,
too that came up.
okay.
Yeah.
A question for you, Nicole, is you've talked about on your post too about digital reset. How do you help parents have maybe even for themselves, like parents listening right now, and they need a digital reset? How do you have any tips or strategies that would really help parents and providing that digital reset for themselves or even for the family?
Yeah. So I make some basic suggestions. And sometimes the family, it's appropriate for everyone to just have a detox,
Mm-hmm.
depending on how severe it is. But basic things like don't have your phone at the dinner table, and actually try to have a family dinner without any devices or technology
Yep.
and just check in with each other. Don't go to bed with your phone. I know that's a big one. And everybody says, oh, well, I need it for the alarm clock. And I've got a little $7 alarm clock by my bed from
Right.
Amazon and
Right.
Yep.
it works great.
It's awesome.
It wakes me up every morning.
Wakes me up every morning, even if I don't want to.
I know.
Right?
So yeah, just some like, try to reduce the blue light an hour before you go to bed. Get outside. I think it's part of a broader conversation too. Like when you start talking about it, you kind of have to talk about like, how is the family operating? Like,
Right.
what are people exercising? Are we eating healthy? Like, it's a part of just like overall wellness.
Right.
And if we're like too much into the technology, then that's taking away from that time that we should be spending being healthy and healthy together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I wanted to touch briefly on monitoring your kids. So we're getting some questions about like what products are great for like monitoring my kids' social media and monitoring their phones. And I'm not quite sure how I feel about monitoring at all. I don't know that that's really great for the trust between a parent and a teenager. So where are you at when it comes to parent monitoring the teens' online activities?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the trust for sure. Kids are smarter than we are, and they're going to get around all of your parental controls. They're going to figure it out. So what I do is I talk about, again, with the connection, it's all about that. If you're connected, then you have trust. And trust is really important because you can say to your kid, and this is why I do advocate for waiting until they're in high school.
Yeah.
So, but again, if Pandora's box was open before that, you can still build this. But just teaching them, about what the effects are, what this is doing to them, teaching them how to be good cyber citizens and not say nasty things, and just if you teach them and you model for them, then you've built that trust in them that you can give it to them and they're going to be appropriate. Now, what I suggest is if you start seeing your kid, like if behavior is changing or they're not maybe sleeping at night or their grades are dropping, you're starting to see like some issues. That's when I would say, the parents can absolutely take the phone and search it if the child isn't being open about what's going on. I always tell them that the phone isn't really private. I mean, if you're putting stuff out there, it's not private. So then it's not private from your parents.
Right.
It's not like the diary,
Right.
It's just way more just out there. So parents need to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, I noticed something's up. Like I need to go through this. But as far as like apps and parental controls, that just reduces the trust and makes the kid go behind their backs and rebel anyway.
I agree. And it can be scary. I mean, just right now on our podcast Instagram, we're getting bots, so many bots, like looking at the stories, and they're like targeted. They're like porn related words and going. I haven't like gone down the rabbit hole, but I'm sure they link over to porn sites, and the verbiage is like raunchy. And I'm like, I'm supposed to let my 13-year-old on here, like and so the tech companies are not like catching these things very quickly and not removing them very quickly. And so like your kids could be having these very inappropriate conversations or receiving inappropriate things. And we cannot rely on Instagram or Facebook or what any of these companies to be catching it for us. So, there is a need if you're going to let your kid on social media to know what's going on there. Like there's a balance to be had. It's an interesting thing that I'm glad I'm not at that point yet.
Yeah, for sure. And it really does come down to the parent responsibility, and then the parent-child connection.
Right.
Yes.
Now there's this conversation around like the government, putting limits on social media and big tech, and Utah passed a law that you can't be on social media under 18. And when I first heard about that law, I thought, well, how are they going to enforce that?
Yeah. Have you heard anything on that?
Well, I'm learning that they want to do facial recognition.
Yeah, right.
To determine if you're old enough. Wow. And then that then is like gets into like more privacy issues.
Right.
You want your kids to be, scanned all the time. So my thing is the parents really just need to take some ownership over what goes on in their house. And yes, it's hard. I have a teenager. I will tell you, I won't sleep until, he's well out of my house.
Mm-hmm.
But, the way I see it is if it's not hard, then you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
So my thing is just stay connected with your kid and just always be just aware of what's going on.
I love that, Nicole, staying connected with your kid, because that's what, again, like you can trust that and help your child come to you. Like, hey, if this is going on online, come to me. Let's talk about it. If you're feeling uncomfortable, come to me. Let's talk about it. If you see something like a bot or like someone reaching out to you and it's a stranger, or again, or if you got yourself in a difficult situation or uncomfortable situation, come to me, talk about it. And that is the connection piece. It can't be like we're checking their phones, once a day, because then that could get into a little bit of a, oh, I'm only going to do it once a week. Well, let's be real. It's, we're finding, we find my phone and we're looking at, Life 360 a couple times a day to see where our kids are.
Mm-hmm.
So we know the privacy thing, you take it a little inch and it goes a mile. So, but we have to really rely on the connection and the relationship that we're building. And that is the place to start. That is the place to really continue to build, because if something, is going on with your teenager or your child, they need to feel comfortable coming to you and be like, hey, mom, dad, something happened here. I need your help.
That's right. Yeah,
And that they're not going to
absolutely.
get shamed or punished for it, right? I think
Yes.
that's the key.
Yes, because you've already established that this stuff is hard to navigate, right? It's hard for us adults to navigate. So I often will tell my teenager, like, it's not your fault. Like, we all struggle with it.
Mm-hmm.
And, so he doesn't think that it's because of him or I don't trust him or whatever. It's hard for everyone. And I don't think we should wait for government regulations. I mean, certainly big tech is never going to step up and
They're going
do
to
what
keep
they need
suing
to
the
do.
government for trying to
Yeah.
regulate them.
Yes, exactly. And, I think about, like, I was a teenager in the 90s and we all knew smoking was bad for us, but we all still smoked. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the government had regulations on it. The Surgeon General's warning was right there on the cigarette pack, but we all went to the coffee shops and still smoked.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, the government can say, yeah, don't get on social media till you're 18, but the kids are still going to do it. And
Right.
the parents really need to take ownership of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Okay, so this was such a nice conversation. We
Yes.
really appreciate you taking the time. And so we will put all of Nicole's information in the episode notes. She does a lot of keynote speaking. She has a private practice. You can follow her on LinkedIn, Instagram, or head to her website and find some lots of great information. So again, thank you, Nicole, for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was really lovely.
Sure. And thanks everybody for listening to Scrolling to Death. We'll catch you next time.